Good afternoon, HMS Bobcats. Mr. Flighto here. Welcome back to another great week at the Helena Middle School. On today's Bob lesson, this is one that I did years ago that I had refound. My Bob lessons got a little disorganized. I lost some on YouTube and then transitioned from one computer to the other. So I wish I would have shown this one a little earlier in the year, but better late than never. Today's Bob lesson is called 10-10-10. It was based on an article that I was reading that I really liked, and it's really based on emotional regulation. What is emotional regulation? Well, throughout the day, throughout the week, throughout life, you're going to have different antecedents or different activating events that can spike your emotions one way or the other. And basically, the premise behind it is that when you're making important decisions or you're having important interactions with people, you want to keep as emotionally straight lined as possible, right? When something bad happens and we're really deep in our emotions, whether it's sadness, anger, rage, whatever, that's not the best time to make decisions, right? And conversely as well, if things are really good and we're up and we're feeling great and we're feeling happy and ecstatic and super positive emotions, that's not necessarily a great time to make important decisions either. And kind of the basis of this Bob lesson is that you really have to control your emotions in life, both when good and bad things happen. So let's rock and roll. Let's get into this. Hope you all have a great week. Running on a new Bob lesson. This one's going to be titled 10-10-10. This Bob lesson is going to talk about emotional regulation, decision making, recognizing, having some mindfulness to recognize what's going on with us emotionally, any given time of the day, any given day of the week, so on and so forth. But first, let's be our best this week at HMS. Let's be Bob. Let's be safe. All right, as we get into this today, I'm going to introduce a couple new terms for you guys. I think you guys can handle this being eighth graders. And these new terms are going to, you're going to need to understand them and what they are as I talk about the decision-making process with 10-10-10 here today. The first is mindfulness. This is kind of a trendy thing, kind of in the counseling psychology world. And really what mindfulness is the quality or state of being conscious or aware of something. So being aware consciously of those things around us. So much of our life is unconscious. We just do it. We are creatures of habit. If you think about walking, putting one step in front of the other, that's an unconscious process. You just do it. You don't have to think right foot forward, left foot forward. So mindfulness is being conscious and aware of something. Second definition is a mental state achieved by focusing one's awareness on the present moment while calmly acknowledging and accepting one's feelings, thoughts, and bodily sensations, used as a therapeutic technique. And that's kind of the definition that we're going to use today. I'm going to introduce here in a moment. Think about a time when you had a really important decision to make, or think about a time when you had an antecedent or something happen where you were really upset or angry or really jubilant and joyful. And being aware of the feelings you have in those moments, the thoughts you're thinking in those moments, the bodily sensations you're having. Do you tense up? Do you get really tight, or you get really loose and comfortable and relaxed? So that's what mindfulness is a quality or state, being aware of what's going on in our life. The second thing we're talking about is metacognition. And metacognition is very closely tied to mindfulness. Metacognition is awareness and understanding of one's own thought processes. How I like to describe metacognition is thinking about how you're thinking. For instance, I just got an email that kind of ticked me off. I didn't appreciate the email. I think it was off base and unwarranted. And I'm sitting here thinking about how I'm going to respond to the email. And I had to step outside of my own thought process and kind of look at my thought process and say, I'm wanting to respond in kind of a get you back, one up you sort of way. And is that the right way to respond to that email? So that would be in a definition of metacognition. So I often say to students that I'm working with that you want life to be like the stock market. Here is a mutual fund that I own that I kind of keep an eye on every day. And if you look closely at this, going from left to right in chronological order, you'll see that there's lots of ups and downs going on here. You have ups, you got downs almost on a daily basis. But if you look at from July through the last 2 years, you'll see that it's an overall gain. That's kind of how we want life to be. Always slowly trending upward, working on
getting a little bit better every day, and acknowledging that we're going to have some good days and some bad days. So right here I have kind of a baseline. If you look at this black bar, and this is an emotional baseline of how maybe any given day goes, how any given period goes, how any given week, month, year goes. And if you notice, you've got lots of positive things going on in life, positive emotions, happiness, joyful, gratitude. There's all sorts of positive emotions out there. And we also have negative emotions that we experience every day, every week, every month, every year. Sadness, guilt, anger, frustration, so on and so forth. And if you look at this like a wave, like you would a heart monitor, it's going to go up and it's going to go down throughout probably any given day. It's going to go up and down through any given maybe week. Sometimes you have good weeks, sometimes you have bad weeks, sometimes you have seasons that go good, sometimes you have seasons that go not so good, or years that go not so good. I would say for a lot of middle school students, 8th grade students, you guys could probably look back at the last couple of years and see lots of ups and downs. Middle school is a very difficult time for some people. And so as I move to the next slide, where I'm going with this is our decision making. And you'll notice now that we have the baseline, the black baseline bar, and then I put in 2 more blue bars. And when it comes to decision making in life, we should really try to use metacognition, use mindfulness to recognize where we're at in life, and specifically where our emotions are at in life. If our emotions are spiked any higher or any lower than the blue bars here, we're probably not going to make very good decisions in life. Specifically when our emotions are spiked below the blue bar in a negative tone. So many times we have an antecedent, something that happens in life, and it upsets us and gets us really angry, really sad, whatever, and we want to have a knee-jerk reaction. We want to make a decision then. Use mindfulness, use metacognition to recognize that, hey, this is a really tough time. I just need to hunker down right now, wait for my emotions to get more regulated, more baselined, and then make a decision on where I'm going to go from here. Another tip I'd like to share with you guys today is put yourself in that moment when something doesn't go right or something goes really good. But more specifically, when something doesn't go right. I want you to stop and ask yourself, how will you feel about this situation in 10 minutes? A lot of times that's all it takes to get emotionally back regulated, let our emotions get back to flatlined. And a lot of times if we wait 10 minutes before we react, we're going to have a different reaction, which hopefully leads to a more positive consequence coming if we can just hold on for 10 minutes. How about 10 months? Think about something that was bothering you 10 months ago, or a tough time you were going through 10 months ago. I got something in mind right now for me. And 10 months ago, I was feeling a completely different way about the situation I'm thinking about right now. And in the moment, because I had been through similar situations, I knew that in another 10 months I was going to feel differently about this. My emotions were going to be in a completely different spot 10 months from now. I just needed to wait it out. Even though at the time my emotions spoke to, when I was doing my mindfulness, my emotions spoke to my thoughts, and my thoughts may have been kind of negative or kind of upset or angry or sad. I knew that in 10 months I would feel a lot different about the situation I was going in. So that's another thing to think about, is how will you feel about that current situation in 10 months? Finally, how will you feel about the situation in 10 years? With a lot of things that don't go so right in life, time really can be the cure for a lot of things in life. Some of those things become a part of our journey and who we are, and they kind of mold us into who we are. But if you take any situation that has got you really heated or really upset or has your emotions spiked in the moment, you'll find that 10 minutes it's going to look a little bit different, 10 months it's going to look a lot different, and 10 years it could be completely 180 degrees different. So use that metacognition that we talked about, that we learned today. Use that mindfulness before we have any sudden knee-jerk reactions in situations where our emotions are spiked. All right, that brings us to this week's quote of the week, which is, when you find yourself in an unpleasant state of mind, use that use that mindfulness and that metacognition to tell yourself, to simply remind yourself that this too shall pass.
All right, we're on to this week's Jelly Bean Question of the Week winners. Trayson Fisher, Wyatt Story, Blaine Mayer, Stetson Sear, Gregory Cole, and Josie Schneider. The correct answer was Maine, which kind of blew my mind until I looked at a globe, and then it all made a lot more sense. I had one name that I drew that was a winner, but I could not read it, so we got to be legible with our names, crew. All right, this week's Jelly Bean Question of the Week. Diego and his grandfather have the same birthday. When the balloons arrive, they are all tangled up. Diego's grandfather is 3 times as old as him. How old is Diego's grandfather? The balloons that were all tangled up were a 6, an 8, a 7, and a 2. If you think you know the answer, submit your answer Bob box. Like I say every week, make sure your name is legible. Make sure your first and last name is on it, or I've got to draw the very next name. And tune in next week to see if you're a winner. All right, Bobcats, make it a great week at the Helena Middle School.